with another video. Thank you for watching. Every once in a while, I mess around on the website YAPMS, which stands for yet another political map simulator, and just mess around with different scenarios. So one of the scenarios that I've been really interested about lately is what if the states along Pacific sides of the country form a coalition politically, and then all the interior states form. Who would win? Who would win the presidency? What would the balance of power look like? So if we shift over here to Google Maps, we got a lot of big cities along the coast: Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, San Diego. You got, excuse me, you got Miami, you got other Florida cities along the coast, and then also Washington up to New York and up to Boston as well. Pretty big cities. Chicago is the number 3 biggest metro area in the country. It's not on the ocean, but it is on water, Lake Michigan. You got other big cities here on Lake Michigan area. You got Minneapolis, St. Paul, you got Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago, you got Cleveland up here, Detroit right here. Toronto is a big city within Canada. So what would happen if we take purple for coast and green for interior? What would the balance of power look like at the presidential level for different elections? So purple states along the coast: Washington, Oregon, California, Alaska, Hawaii. So those are right along the coast. Hawaii is an archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. Alaska is surrounded by the Pacific, the Bering Strait, and the Arctic Ocean. We got the US-Mexico border right here. So on the other coast, we would have Florida. Georgia is coastal. South Carolina, North Carolina are coastal. Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, DC, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, because you got, coastline down here, but also a little bit of, up here as well. New York is a coast. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. Vermont is landlocked, but if you really, really want to, you can toss it in there. But Vermont's more interior. So Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, all of these states would be shaded in green. That's a pretty close election. That's a really close election. All it would take would be a state swinging back and forth. Maybe that might be Pennsylvania. Maybe that might be, other states along the coast. So this would be a coast victory, 272 to 266. If you really, really want to, you can toss Vermont in that, Atlantic seaboard category from Maine down to Florida. So that would be a coast win 275 to interior win 263. So coast would win by, you need 270, you would win by 5. Technically, if you really, really want to be super technical, Texas is along the Gulf Coast, Louisiana is too, Mississippi is, Alabama is, all along that Gulf Coast. Ohio touches the Great Lakes, so does Michigan, so does Indiana, Illinois does, Wisconsin, and Minnesota does as well. 420, that's a nice number. So you got 420 if you count states that touch water, whether that's Pacific, Gulf Coast, Atlantic Great Lakes. That would be an overwhelming 420 to 118. But if you were only talking about states that were along the Atlantic or along the Pacific, they would probably look like that. A very close 272 to 266 win. But if you add in the Great Lakes and you add in the Gulf Coast, 417, or depending on how you classify Vermont, 420. Now, most of these states in real world don't have the same politics. Pacific states, California, Oregon, Washington have pretty similar politics. Northeast has pretty similar. Midwest is pretty hit or miss, depending on the state you're in. In real life, these states would not vote like this at all. But this is a hypothetical. This is a fantasy about what would the election look like if it were entirely based off of being on the coast, being in the interior, or if your state has, access to Atlantic, Pacific, Gulf Coast, or Great Lakes, would be 420 or 417. But that would be a pretty decisive coastal victory. So that's very interesting. If states voted in accordance with if they have a coastline or not. So, with that being said, very interesting scenario, very interesting hypothetical. That is the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Deuces.